Hello and welcome along to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host, Matt Addison, and Tom Beattie is with me. For the final time in 2024, we're going to have a look back on Liverpool's win over Leicester, a look ahead to the game against West Ham this weekend as well. But before we dive into all of that, as ever, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, you can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link also gives you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link with all of the information on that is in the podcast episode description box below. Tom, you were there last night. I was there as well at Anfield. It was an enjoyable one, another win for Liverpool. I just said before we started recording this podcast that there wasn't really any point when I thought Liverpool weren't going to win. I think you were in agreement with that. Did you enjoy the game and what did you make of it?
Yeah, it's always nice, obviously, to get to Anfield sort of over Christmas, and I love the Boxing Day fixture as well. So, yeah, it's a nice tradition, and obviously you always want to win as well, don't you? I think Klopp maybe won every one of his Boxing Day games, didn't he? So, yeah, I was confident coming into the game that Liverpool would come away with a win. But I thought we had to kind of work for it on the day. Obviously, we conceded early, and then you expect them to kind of sit in, which they did. And we had to kind of break them down then for the last kind of 85 minutes, didn't we? But, yeah, obviously 3 goals on the night for Liverpool again. And it just seems other than the goal conceded there, they are able to keep it tight, aren't they, and go up the other end. And you kind of, you'd back them in every game, really, to create chances. And that happened again last night. And a bit of brilliance from Mo Salah again, which, we've said a few times on the show now, haven't we? On form, he's probably the best player in the world, I'd say, currently. And he showed that again in that game. So, yeah, things seem to be rolling on really well for Liverpool. And, yeah, it's another one, kind of grinding out the results and coming into the game. A couple of results went Liverpool's way as well. Obviously, the Chelsea game was the big one. They're in second place. So, yeah, I think it's a massive boost, I think, sort of, heading into the West Ham game as well.
Yeah, it's a great position for Liverpool to be in. And I think it was a game that should be comfortable for Liverpool. You wouldn't expect anything different. Obviously, we've looked back a few times at the Nottingham Forest game, but you look at that maybe in a different way now. I think they're third maybe or fourth in the table. They're certainly very high up. It doesn't feel like the kind of result that it felt at the time. I don't think there was ever really a point when you felt that was going to be the case here. And I suppose the key difference as well is that if Liverpool had needed a goal, they had Luis Diaz on the bench who didn't even come on. You had Harvey Elliott there. You had Diogo Jota to come on. There's, so many options. Federico Chiesa now back as well from obviously injury first and then illness. So they've got so many options that if they do need a goal or they do need to make a bit of a rotation, they've got those players there to do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of characterised Slot's time in charge, hasn't it? Being able to rotate that squad and, the plethora of options he's got at the moment in attacking positions. Obviously, Chiesa's coming back from injury and he's obviously struggled to get in the team because of that in the early months of the season. But obviously, Jota's back as well and Núñez led the line, obviously, last night before coming off. So, yeah, there's a lot of options in there. And I guess I think that's why the team always kind of seems fresh. I think the only point of the season where it seemed like they were maybe running on empty a little bit was that run of games where obviously it was City, Real Madrid, Newcastle in kind of a short space of time, wasn't it? But I think other than that, they've looked pretty fresh all season. And that was another one last night, like you say. Obviously, Diaz, he's done so well recently and, he's been in amongst the goals. But being able to kind of take him out of the firing line a little bit, I think kind of helps, doesn't it, to keep him fresh. And, I think the manager's always got one eye on sort of the next run of games as well. So getting through that last night, obviously Núñez played the majority of the game, didn't he? And he was kind of in the number 9 position. But then you probably expect Diaz to come back in, I think, for the West Ham game. So, and obviously United coming up as well. That's going to be a stern test. So it just seems like he's making the right decisions, I think, in terms of his selections. And to come off a game like the Tottenham game, which was obviously very blood and thunder at both ends, and Diaz led the line there, didn't he? Obviously got a couple of goals and probably a man of the match performance. Him and Salah, I thought, were fantastic in that game. And yeah, obviously Salah in the Leicester game as well. He's always there. He was probably a bit quieter, I'd say, last night, wasn't he, overall? But that brilliance again that he can conjure up out of nowhere, and I was kind of in the line of sight for that goal. He could only really put it in one position in the net, and he was able to do it. And it just looks like a player who's running on confidence, and sort of the whole kind of the attacking options at the moment, they all seem to be running on confidence. Núñez, he struggled for goals at times, but I thought his performance was okay last night. He held up the ball pretty well, and yeah, I think it all comes back to the manager, like you said there. It's sort of, he's able to rotate them options, and he's keeping everyone fresh, and I think it's really paying dividends for him.
Yeah, I wanted to mention Cody Gakpo as well whilst we're on the forward line. Obviously, an excellent goal from him, and he's in good form as well. I think it's 3 in his last 5 in the Premier League that he's scored in. He's clearly making a big difference in the final third in other ways as well. He feels like maybe one of the few players that Liverpool have got that can maybe drop a shoulder and beat a man as well, which I think is important when you're playing a low block or a defensive team like Leicester. So I think he is in really good form at the moment. And, it's no surprise really in that, he played for PSV off the left, and that's the player that Liverpool signed and didn't really use him in that position. But you mentioned in your previous answer there about, Arne Slot making the right decisions. I think it's clearly been the right decision to say to him that he's just a left winger, just to focus on that. And it might mean that he doesn't play as much maybe when Luis Diaz has to play there, and maybe when Diogo Jota's 100% fit. But it's better, I think, to have a 75% of the minutes, but at a really high level, rather than maybe playing a little bit more through the middle, but not doing as well. It seems like he's really comfortable and really confident on that left wing at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's been one of the real highlights of this season, how well he's done, and being able to swap him in and out with Diaz, I think has been a massive help, and they're both at the top of the game at the moment, it seems to be. And that goal from Gakpo, I mean, that was world class for me, to be able to kind of cut inside like he did. And I thought, Liverpool, you don't want to kind of get dragged into a battle kind of in that second half, do you, where you're coming out and you're 1-0 down, and to get that goal just before the stroke of half time, it couldn't have kind of worked out much better, I think, for him. And yeah, he took it really well, that goal. And that has been the story of his season a little bit, hasn't it? He's been able to make an impact. And, particularly like the club games, for example, he's been massive in terms of his performances there. He's really dragged the team, I think, even in Europe as well. He's been really impressive. And yeah, to be able to bring in a player of that quality where he is that little bit more fresh, obviously he's a seasoned international, isn't he, with a lot of experience. So if you're able to bring a player either off the bench or to start him where he's had a good rest, I think that's always a massive positive. And I think at the moment that's maybe what's setting Liverpool apart a little bit from our rivals in the, obviously, we have had a couple of injuries. Jota, for example, he was ruled out, weren't he, in terms of the attacking options. But, being able to kind of freshen things up, like I said just before, I think that's been a massive positive for Liverpool so far this season. And he's probably the standout kind of example, isn't he, of if you keep a player a little bit more fresh, he can give you that extra kind of 5-10%, I think, in games like that against Leicester. And he was a proper difference maker, I thought, last night, to be able to step up and get that goal. It was very timely, wasn't it? Sort of going into half time. And yeah, that's what you need, isn't it, when you're chasing a title? So yeah, players like that, they've been massive, I think, so far this season for Liverpool.
Yeah, I think you're right as well in terms of Liverpool's rivals. I think, you look at Arsenal, there's been a lot of talk about their over-reliance maybe on set pieces, and obviously that's a good weapon to have, but you'd look at Martinelli saying that the same position as Cody Gakpo, and I don't think there's any comparison really in terms of the final third impact in terms of goals and assists that those players have got. Obviously, Mohamed Salah comfortably ahead of Bukayo Saka, and then you've got other options if, you go with either Jota or Núñez or Luis Diaz through the middle there, clear upgrades, and you can keep them fresh as well. It's very much a team effort, but the fact that they've got, I suppose you would say, 5 options plus Federico Chiesa, given we haven't really seen a huge amount of him, it's definitely promising. And I think there's probably, even more that you can get out of them. I think Luis Diaz has still probably got another level to get to in terms of goal scoring. clearly Darwin Núñez definitely has. Maybe even Cody Gakpo as well. So it's definitely a positive. And Liverpool also have goals from midfield as well. Curtis Jones getting himself onto the score sheet, which was nice. Nice for him to get a message from Jurgen Klopp after the game as well. He spoke to the BBC about that, and the text message that said he'd reached 100 Premier League appearances, which he didn't know, but obviously Jurgen Klopp had been keeping an eye on that from afar. So yeah, it was a positive night all round really. But for the goal scorers in particular, we've touched on Gakpo, but Curtis Jones as well. It is something that he needs to add more to his game, isn't it, goals? But he does seem to be doing that a little bit more this season.
Yeah, and I think obviously it's been interesting to see him this season. Maybe a bit further forward. He's playing in that number 10 at times, isn't he? And he did that last night. And yeah, kind of arriving late into the box. Obviously, I think for his goal, Núñez had kind of missed it, hadn't he? And he kind of came in at the back post and was able to stick it in the back of the net. And that's what you want to see a bit more, I think, from Curtis. Kind of obviously getting on the score sheet a little bit more and adding that to his game. I think Dominic Szoboszlai, in recent weeks, he seems to have upped his performance, and particularly when he came on against Leicester, he looked really good as well. So there is that bit of competition, I think, for that number 10 slot. But I think the pair of them at the moment, if they are kind of sharing that role, it's a little bit like the Diaz and Gakpo situation where, if they're able to kind of interchange in terms of, starting the game, you're able to keep them fresh, and that they're both excellent options in their own right, I think. And they bring a bit of something different. I felt kind of coming into the game, it was a good choice, I think, starting them in the game. He's obviously great at keeping possession, isn't he? And, kind of allowing you to dominate the game. And I think first half, Liverpool maybe struggled to dominate the game in some ways, didn't he? But I felt second half that really improved. And yeah, Curtis, I felt he deserved his goal on the night, to be fair. I felt it was a really good performance again. And things have really stepped up for him this season. He's become a key player, I think, in this Slot kind of era so far. And it's great to see, isn't it? A player who's come through the academy, obviously a local lad, and I think he's relishing every minute. And even seeing the interview after the game, like you mentioned, he just seems to be a player kind of on top of his game at the moment. And, it's great to see, isn't it? Obviously, 100 games now in the Premier League, and, he is kind of stepping up as well. And you can see a real future for him under this manager, I think. And, I think he is going from strength to strength at the moment.
Yeah, he's been really consistent, hasn't he? He's obviously been able to manage his fitness, which I think is a big thing, because he's been able to rotate, and they're not relying on him for every single game, which they have done in the past, and that's obviously been detrimental. But, he's in a position now where the performances, when he does get those opportunities, I think it was maybe a surprise to me that he played, only because Dominic Szoboszlai played so well against Spurs. I thought he might get the chance to go again, but obviously the rotation worked. It was the right decision because Curtis comes in. We're going to look ahead to West Ham in a second. Obviously, Dominic Szoboszlai picked up the yellow card, so he's now suspended for the weekend. So Curtis Jones will get the chance to go again, and then it'll be interesting to see if it's Jones or Szoboszlai then for Manchester United after that. But I suppose we're at the point now with the midfield where you'd almost not be particularly bothered really between McAllister, Gravenberch, Jones, and Szoboszlai. It's pretty much any three from those four. Then you've got Harvey Elliott to put in there as well. It's as long as they're all fit and they're all available, which they are at the moment, I think, certainly, from four of those names to pick three out of the four, I think pretty much any game you'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, all the options seem really settled, don't they, at the moment? And it is great to see. Obviously, a couple of years ago, there was that struggle, wasn't there? Particularly when Henderson and Fabinho were kind of coming to the end at the time at Liverpool. And I guess it's all credit to kind of the regime that went out at the end of the season of last season. They were able to kind of rebuild slowly, weren't they? Obviously, McAllister came in, Gravenberch and Szoboszlai, and they're really showing what they're capable of now, I think. And we've sort of been able to add consistency there with Jones as well. He's really stepped up so far this season. And like you said as well, Harvey Elliott, hopefully second half of the season we get to see a little bit more from him as well, because he played a massive role particularly last season under Klopp, there weren't many players who played more minutes than him under Klopp, so that showed kind of what he thought of him. So I think he will get minutes kind of second half of the season, and it's good to see him back as well. But there doesn't seem to be much of a drop-off, which is great in terms of the quality in that midfield at the moment. And yeah, like you say, I mean, you could drop any of them names into them kind of set positions, couldn't you? I think the only one at the moment is obviously Ryan Gravenberch has played a lot of football, and you wonder where that break is kind of going to come in for him. But obviously Endo's been coming off the bench more and more in recent times, so you know, I don't think there'd be a massive drop off if he was to start a game at some point as well. I don't think he's ever let Liverpool down particularly, so there's another option there if there needs to be a bit of rotation at some stage. But yeah, I think at the moment that, you know, the amount of options he's got at his disposal in terms of slot, I think it's really positive. And yeah, particularly, you know, in recent years where that was maybe a problem position, I think the rebuild's been really positive, and you know, it is good to see. And I think that's been a massive reason, I think, why Liverpool are currently top of the league. That kind of stability in midfield, and you know, they all kind of know the roles. And we said about Szoboszlai before, he seems to be coming into his own more and more. Obviously, Curtis, we've mentioned a lot so far today as well. He seems to be getting better and better. So there seems to be a lot of positives, I think, in that area of the pitch at the moment. So yeah, I think that's been a massive reason why Liverpool are doing so well. I think on both fronts, in terms of domestically and in the European stakes as well so far this season.
Yeah, there's been no real need so far for Harvey Elliott to repeat what he did so often last year and come off the bench and make a difference. But I'm sure that will happen. You know, at some point Liverpool might need him, and he will be there to be able to provide that. But I think that's going to be a big positive as well, isn't it? To have a player who's effectively not played at all in the first half of this season, other than, you know, a few little bits and pieces here and there, to have, you know, without going down the sort of cliched, he's going to be like a new signing or anything like that. I mean, he almost is, and he's not really played that much. I think, you know, Federico Chiesa obviously comes into the same category, but we're less sure of what he's going to look like in this Liverpool team. With Harvey Elliott, we know that if he's fit, there's going to be opportunities, whether that's off the bench or from the start here and there. That's going to be a big thing as well, isn't it, in the second half of this season? Yeah,
absolutely. I think we can see a mile off in terms of where he kind of fit into that setup as well. I think in that number 10 role, it's kind of made for him. I think when I was looking at sort of the way Slot used to set up a Feyenoord, he was always the player who jumped out to me in that number 10 position. So I want to kind of see that second half of the season, how that's going to play out. And yeah, like you say, it does feel a little bit like a new sign in a sense, in that you can drop him in now, and I think certain games is going to really suit him. So yeah, that's a massive positive for the manager, being able to welcome back a player of that quality. And yeah, you touched on Chiesa as well. Obviously, it's been a bit stop-start for him in terms of injuries and that sort of thing, but we all know what quality he's got. Obviously, he came into the club at a time where maybe, you know, we struggled with injuries in recent times, but I think the quality's always been there, and the little kind of aspects of his game that we have seen in kind of, you know, parts of the season so far, you can see how he kind of slot into that team, maybe on that right-hand side or maybe even the false nine. Obviously, Diaz has played there in recent times, and to have another option in that position, I think will be a massive positive for the manager. So if Liverpool aren't to make any signings in January, which, you know, they haven't been known to make signings really, have they, in recent years, I think maybe looking back, possibly Van Dijk in terms of a big signing. You know, Diaz as well, obviously, he came in, didn't he, a few years ago, but normally they don't seem to make 3 or 4 signings sort of thing. It seems to only be 1 or 2 maximum, doesn't it? So to have them kind of options coming back in as well, yeah, I think that's going to be a massive positive for the manager in the second half of the season.
In terms of West Ham this weekend, then, how many changes are you expecting to see for that one? I think if Szoboszlai wasn't suspended, then I think I would expect him to have come back in, but I suspect it'll probably be Curtis Jones again for that one. But what do you think of maybe a left-back change? Would you make maybe, you know, a Luis Diaz coming into the forward line? How different do you think it'll be on Sunday compared to Thursday?
Yeah, I think the manager's been very open to rotating at left back, hasn't he, so far this season? And obviously Tsimikas has had a lot of game time in recent times. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe comes back in for the West Ham game. I think it's been difficult for Robertson in recent times. Maybe his form hasn't been the best, or what we've come to expect from him. Obviously, the sending off at Fulham, and I felt last night as well. Obviously, he got drawn in on the goal a little bit, but we know the quality he's got. I think it's possibly a case of rotating him that little bit more, maybe managing his minutes a little bit more as he starts to get older. But again, having that option there of Tsimikas, we know he's good enough in that position, and his delivery last night when he came onto the pitch, I felt was great, kind of going forward as well. So we know we've got a decent player there in terms of left back spot. And yeah, I guess the other kind of point is maybe the centre forward position. So yeah, Núñez started the game, didn't he? And obviously came off second half. So maybe Jota would come back in, I think, kind of, leading the line. I still think he's in that spot at the moment, Jota, isn't he? Where obviously the manager's kind of trying to play him into fitness a little bit, and so he's maybe stuck in that kind of regard. But yeah, possibly if you can get him on the pitch from the start, I think that again would be a massive positive, because I think his quality when he came on, I think even his hold-up play and his link-up play was excellent when he came on against Leicester. So yeah, being able to play him into a bit of form and fitness, I think would be a good option for the manager against West Ham. But yeah, I think other than that, possibly, the back four would be pretty settled other than Tsimikas. And yeah, possibly with Szoboszlai being suspended, you'd expect maybe Jones to start the game, or even Harvey Elliott, like we mentioned before. But I think maybe Gravenberch could start as well. I know that we mentioned about Endo before, but just in terms of his quality and consistency so far this season, I think it's very hard to think of dropping him at this stage of the season, so I'd expect him to play as well. But yeah, there could be a couple of changes in there, I think, for the West Ham game.
Yeah, it's a free midweek, isn't it, as well? So it's not as if there's another game to think about after that. They will have a little bit of a turnaround time. But just in terms of West Ham, I mean, to look ahead and preview the game a little bit, I'm not quite sure what to expect, to be honest, because you'd look at the Premier League table, you'd look at some of the results that they've got this season and think that they weren't a huge threat. But then you look at some of the players that they've got. I'm a huge fan of Paquetá. Jared Bowen is excellent. They've got Mohamed Kudus. There's enough players there, I would say, to give Liverpool a few scares if they're not at it. We've seen, in the past that's happened. Liverpool didn't win there. Was it 2-2 maybe last season where Liverpool didn't win there? They're not having the best season. Clearly, it's not gone particularly well for them since the managerial change. But I think this could be a tricky one if Liverpool let it.
Yeah, like you say, obviously, late last season, it was 2-2, wasn't it? When Liverpool were going for the title, and it's always a tough place to go. I think the London Stadium. I think they've always kind of got a decent side, haven't they? Like you say, they've always got options, and particularly that forward line it is pretty good, to be fair. And yeah, Fulkrug, Bowen, Kudus as well. So yeah, they do pose a bit of a challenge in that respect, I think. And I think, yeah, it's been a bit of a tumultuous season for them, hasn't it? Obviously, they got rid of David Moyes at the end of the season. Last season, Lopetegui, didn't seem to work for them, did it? But yeah, maybe that change might give them a bit of a boost. And I think they beat Southampton, didn't they, last time out? So they've had a few games now, I think, Bournemouth, Brighton, Southampton now, obviously down the lower end of the table, where they've been able to get a couple of decent results in there. So, yeah, it's difficult to kind of say kind of what we're going to expect, but I always kind of think, when you're chasing the title, you've got to go away from home and win these kind of games, and they're always the toughest tests, I think. It's not so much them kind of big six fixtures. I think sometimes it's them games kind of lower down the table away from home where the atmosphere is there, and possibly you're coming off the back of European games, or in our case a bit of fixture congestion around Christmas. So it's always a tough test, and I think we've got a few of them fixtures coming up in January. Obviously, Forest are doing really well as well, and I think we've got to go away to the City ground at some point next month as well. So, yeah, these games they're always a tough test, and I think Liverpool are going to have to be on the game. I think going down there, and hopefully they can come away with 3 points. But it's always a staying test. I think these kind of games, and if you're going to go on and win a title, you need to be churning out these games for me, and getting results on the road, and hopefully they can continue the form they've been in recently.
I think it's one of those games where you don't want to go a goal behind. I think if Liverpool go 1 or 2 in front, then the game will be done, the atmosphere will be killed, and it'll be probably a breeze from that point, really. If Liverpool are 1 or 2 goals up, you wouldn't expect West Ham to fight back and be able to cope with that. But I suppose that is something that Liverpool have struggled a little bit with. Obviously, went 1 behind to Leicester. It's happened a couple of times recently where they've had to come from behind, or even if they've not had to come from behind, it's been a bit of a slower start, and they've had to then kick on a bit in the second half to get it done. But yeah, you'd like to think at least that they could make a strong start. I think it's an evening game. It's going to be under the lights. At Christmas, you always get a bit of a better atmosphere. It's going to be a game where you think if Liverpool have to step it up, you'd like to think that they would have that within themselves to be able to go and do that. And if they do perform well, they should win the game. Just to finish then, I'll ask you for a quick score prediction. Having just said that it's almost impossible to know which version of West Ham is going to turn up, are you backing the Reds to go there and get the 3 points?
Yeah, like I say, I think it will be a tricky away game. But yeah, I back Liverpool to get the victory. So I think 2-1 is what I'd say.
Yeah, I was thinking 2-1 as well. 2-1 or maybe 3-1 with a late one on the counter when West Ham is trying to get back into it. But yeah, I think Liverpool will get the job done, but I can definitely see West Ham scoring a goal as well. Mm-hmm. But yes, we'll leave it there for this week and indeed for this year as well. Thank you for everyone for watching along, not just on today's episode, but throughout the whole of 2024. We'll be back in 2025 with more Liverpool.com podcasts for you. Myself, Tom, Kiefer, and everybody else on the Blood Red channel as well. We'll have plenty more content to come. We'll, I'm sure, be looking back at the West Ham game, looking ahead to Manchester United as well at some point next week. But yeah, for the time being, thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you all next time here on the Liverpool.com podcast.